On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Yes, good morning, everybody, and happy bank holiday as well. This is To The Point with me, Patrick Christie's, and Mercy Moroki on your TV, radio, and online. Loads to get stuck into today to kind of really wake you up on this bank holiday Monday. We're delving into Porngate. We're also discussing that Meghan Markle has been sacked off by Netflix. You hate to see it, don't you? You hate to see it.
That's going to make a few people smile, I think. To be
Yeah.
Well, make sure you get in touch with your views. As usual, we want to hear them. gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email. We'll get to those in just a moment, but first, here's the latest news.
Good morning, it's just 1 minute past 10. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. Let's start with international news, and Mariupol officials say Russia resumed shelling the Azovstal steelworks as soon as buses carrying civilians fleeing the plant had left. Ukraine's President Zelensky says the first group of 100 evacuees will arrive in a Ukrainian-held city today. Footage shows them emerging from the plant's rubble and being led to waiting coaches. One woman said she and her baby had been waiting for 2 months to be rescued. Former military intelligence officer Frank Luij told us the siege of Mariupol will continue for some time.
The idea that the Russians have any kind of concern at all for the care and health of non-combatants, and of course they don't. If it suits their purposes, there may be some kind of supply. I personally doubt it. That's not the idea of siege. President Putin quite publicly gave the order that not a fly should be getting into the Azovstal complex. And the siege will continue, and it may continue for some time. It will continue essentially till the Azovstal defenders run out of food, water and ammunition.
Meanwhile, the UK's Ministry of Defence says it's likely that more than a quarter of Russia's battalion tactical groups in Ukraine are now combat ineffective. UK intelligence says it will probably take years for Russia to reconstitute these forces. More than 250 people were detected crossing the channel in small boats yesterday, according to the Ministry of Defence. No crossings were recorded at the end of April amid reports of bad weather, strong winds and choppy seas. Some boats have been seen today in the channel. The Conservative MP Crispin Blunt has announced he'll stand down at the next election. Last month, the former Justice Minister apologised for causing significant upset and concern after he tweeted to show support for an MP who was found guilty of sexually assaulting a 15-year-old boy. Blunt originally claimed the MP, Imran Ahmed Khan, was the victim of a dreadful miscarriage of justice before then issuing an apology. A senior Conservative is rejecting calls to introduce an all-women shortlist to replace the former MP Neil Parish. Parish sparked a by-election in his Tiverton and Honiton constituency when he resigned after admitting to watching porn in the Commons. Some Conservatives had suggested that a female candidate should replace him. Well, the Minister for Higher and Further Education, Michelle Donnellan, told GB News that women simply needed support to get involved in politics.
I find quotas demeaning to women.
women can certainly get there on their own merit. We've seen that with 2 female prime ministers in my own party. We have a Home Secretary who's female, a Foreign Secretary who's female. What we need to be doing is encouraging women to come forward to stand, removing the barriers, which we have been doing with organisations such as Women to Win, led by Baroness Jenkins. But imposing these arbitrary quotas does nobody any favours, in particular women.
Thousands of voters won't have a choice for who to vote for in Thursday's local elections, as some council seats have only one candidate standing. In the 91 impacted seats, the individual candidates will be elected automatically. The vast majority are in Wales, where 72 people will run unopposed. A record-breaking 2.7 million people have been referred for cancer checks over the last year. NHS data shows the number of patients receiving cancer treatment has risen by 2,000 since the start of the pandemic. The NHS says it's expanded its services, diagnostic capabilities, with one-stop shops for tests and mobile clinics. The director of the Barts Cancer Centre, Tom Powles, told GBNews the NHS needs more staff.
Cancer remains our number one killer, will be in the future, and now we have this huge healthcare problem. Do we have the resource to deal with it, which is your question? The human resource we probably don't have right now. We continue to work through this pandemic. We have shortage of doctors and nurses. We put adverts out, but we don't have the resource in the UK as it currently stands to fill those posts. Many people left during the pandemic. Being a nurse, being a doctor during this difficult time was very challenging.
Magistrates can now give out sentences of up to a year as part of efforts to reduce the backlog of criminal cases waiting to be heard. Well, those magistrates will now be able to hand out jail terms double the length than previous for a single offence. The move has been criticised as counterproductive by some lawyers. New research warns that delays in passport processing could cost over £1 billion in cancelled trips this summer. Research from the Centre for Economics and Business estimates that currently there's a 50% probability of people having a successful and timely passport renewal. The Passport Office is currently advising to apply 10 weeks in advance due to delays. You're up to date. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now, let's head back to the point.
Good morning, this is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Moroki, and Patrick Christie's. We're on your TV, radio and online, and of course it's Bank Holiday Monday. We haven't got the day off though, as you can see. We've got a great show lined up for you though to kickstart your day, so here's what's coming up.
Right then, radical action is needed to review working practices in Westminster, apparently. Speaker of the House of Commons, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, has spoken out after concerns about sexism and inappropriate behaviour by politicians in what is being described as Pestminster. Yes, we'll be speaking to the founder of 50-50 Parliament about the obstacles women in politics face and how to make things easier.
Yes, and concerning reports that 2 British men who were volunteering in Ukraine to provide humanitarian relief have been captured by Russian troops. We'll be speaking to the charity they were in contact with later on in the show, so very good interview there. You won't want to miss that.
Indeed, and Bill Gates has piped up yet again. The Microsoft mogul has said that there is a chance that a deadlier and more transmissible virus could emerge and take us back to the pandemic. Read the room, Bill. Anyway, we'll be speaking to a doctor later on to dive into those comments.
Yes, that's all coming up and much more as well across the programme. Of course, we're here until midday as usual, and you can get in touch with your views, gbviews@gbnews.uk. We'll get to as many as we can over the next couple of hours. But first, Patrick's going to give his views on RMPs and their excuses.
Our politicians clearly think that we're idiots. They're taking us all for mugs. We've had some cases in recent weeks that have led to some staggering lies, or honest mistakes from our serving MPs. Porngate is the latest one. Neil Parish was caught watching porn in the House of Commons, and his friends, or should I say a source close to, tried to claim that he was searching for a, get this, Dominator combine harvester and accidentally clicked on a porn link. I mean, this just sums it up, doesn't it? It's a little bit like that Little Britain sketch of a politician apologising about sexual misdemeanour. You know, I was struggling to sleep, so I decided to go for a walk around Hampstead Heath, and in the dark I couldn't see that another man was approaching me. We bumped into each other, I fell to the ground, and as chance would have it, my trousers came down. And that's all I've got to say about that. I mean, Mr Parish then admits to actually watching the video again at the side of the chamber as he was waiting to vote, apparently, which is incredibly weird. And then we've got Beergate. We can actually see a video of Keir Starmer standing in what appears to be a room pretty full of people eating and drinking beer. He claimed they were just taking a break from work. Then it emerges, part of the evening was described as a social event, and one person advertised it as a, quote, greasy night, i.e. a booze-up. Still, Sir Keir said it was just a work event. Then Labour asked whether or not Angela Rayner was there as well. They said no. And then there was footage showing Angela Rayner there. So they had to admit that they'd made yet another honest mistake and perhaps forgot about her involvement. I don't know about you, but I don't think I'd really want people who are this forgetful anywhere near power. And now a delivery driver has come forward to say there was a massive curry order to the Miners' Hall venue. He later retracted this story, but then the plot thickened still. The Labour leader was staying apparently at Durham's Radisson Blu Hotel, all right, nice for some, where food was served outside on its terrace until 9 p.m. But Sir Keir had previously said the hotel he was staying in wasn't serving food. I think the level of political amnesia here is astonishing. How thick do this lot think we are? They're telling lies to cover up lies, and they're taking us all for fools in the process. The best one of all, possibly, was Nicola Sturgeon. She claimed that she couldn't recollect basic facts on more than 50 occasions during her questioning of the Alex Salmond misconduct inquiry. I think she maybe needs medical attention if that's the case. And then, of course, there's Legsgate. Angela Rayner plays a starring role in this one yet again. When the story broke about Angela Rayner attempting to do a Sharon Stone impression, she vehemently denied it. She called it misogyny, and then vast swathes of the media jumped on it, saying how disgusting it was that someone would make this up. And here come the receipts. It's emerged that apparently she was the one who actually told fellow MPs that she was doing it. And she tried to hide behind a facade of sexism and classism. I mean, that actually diminishes the real victims of sexism and classism, doesn't it? Obviously, Boris Johnson has done something similar, but look, whether it's combine harvesters, being ambushed by a cake, forgetting the fact that your deputy leader was at a party with you, or claiming that you're the victim of rampant sexism, I think the quality of our politicians' lies matches that of their political ability. Absolutely dire. Oh, sorry, no, I've made a terrible mistake on this Works laptop. I've just searched for Dominator Combine Harvesters and you wouldn't know... Oh, my God!
Goodness.
Oh, you can't... That's disgusting. But, yeah, no, come off it, really.
Yeah, I mean, that was... to make it worse, he had also come on a few days before that event, that it was found out that it was him.
Yeah.
He'd come on to GBNews, hadn't he? He'd spoken to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Darren McCaffrey had asked him, you know, what do you think about these allegations? Do you think this person should have the whip removed, perhaps resign, when the person's found out? Turns out it was him all along. I mean, for me, I just think how much of an idiot do you have to be to put yourself in that position when you know you are the person who is responsible for it? So I think that kind of showed his intellectual capabilities there. This idea that it was, you know, he was looking for tractors. That's what he said. He was looking for tractors, and he accidentally stumbled upon this. I mean, you know, come on.
I mean, it just doesn't happen, does it? But then it kind of is all undermined by...
Unless it's a fetish, maybe, you know...
For combine harvesters, yes, indeed. Who knew? Well, happy bank holiday morning, everybody. I hope you're awake now. But, look, keep these views coming in, GBViews at GBNews.uk. Do you think the quality of our politicians is a bit diminished? Do you think they're quite a disingenuous bunch? But there we go. Moving on now.
Yes, senior MPs and Speaker of the House of Commons as well, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, have called for major changes to Parliament's working practices. This follows more allegations of sexual misconduct.
Well, on Saturday, Conservative MP, as we've been speaking about, Neil Parish, announced his resignation after it was revealed that he'd viewed pornography apparently twice in the House of Commons. Meanwhile, 56 MPs, that's 8.6% of MPs, have allegations of sexual misconduct currently hanging over them and have been referred to Parliament's Independent Claims and Grievance Scheme.
Yes, well, the former Leader of the House, Dame Andrea Leadsom, says that the scheme itself is not fit for purpose. Of course, this comes days just after the Conservative Party inquiry into the alleged sexist comments and misogyny towards Deputy Labour leader Angela Rayner, which we've been discussing really over the last week. It claimed these allegations that she made the basic instinct comments herself, so that actually she was the source of that, which is very interesting. Well, let's get a bit more stuck into this. Frances Scott is the founder and director of 50-50 Parliament, which is a cross-party campaign to achieve gender equality in the House of Commons. She joins us now. Grateful for your time on this bank holiday Monday, Frances. What's the correct measure of how much women are willing to participate in politics? How many women actually put themselves forward? We know, the numbers in the House of Commons aren't 50-50, but are 50% of are the candidates putting themselves forward women, mostly men? What's the numbers there?
Well, we have over 2,500 women who want to stand for political office. So there are a long list of women who are in the pipeline. And I don't think it can be used as an excuse. I really go back to the point that actually, if you want the best people in Parliament, then you need to have an attractive institution. My daughter has just graduated from university in data science, and the organisations that she works for is out there to attract the brightest and the best. And we want the brightest and the best people running the country, and that has to include half the population that are women. Women make up 50% of law graduates. They're 60% of law graduates, 50% of graduates. They merit fair and rightful representation, and Parliament should be attracting the brightest and the best. To your point about the porn, we can forgive someone for making a mistake once, but the sign of lack of intelligence is making the same mistake twice. And, he admitted to making the same mistake twice. So it's great that he's gone, because it offers the opportunity for someone else to stand. There are 425 men in the House of Commons and only 225 women. So women are outnumbered 2 to 1. We want a modern democracy, and we want men and women forging the future together in equal numbers.
I just want to pick up on something you said there, a phrase which I very much agree with, and I think most people in a meritocracy should, is that you always want the best and brightest. And I just want to get your views on this idea of quotas, perhaps, or all-female shortlists, because to me, as a woman, and I've seen all-black shortlists before on Labour and things like that, it does feel a bit patronising to say, we don't have faith in you to get there on your own merit, so we're going to put you in an, all-BAME shortlist, or in this case, an all-women shortlist. Surely, if the woman is the best of the best, regardless if she's competing with men, she's still going to, prove herself.
Absolutely. Well, in Canterbury, they had an all-women shortlist for the Conservative candidate because all the best candidates were women. Surprise, surprise. There are lots of great women out there. We have had all-men shortlists forever. I don't quite understand why the view is that men merit all men shortlists. I think at the very least we should have 50-50 candidates competing on the platform.
But I mean, the all men shortlists are not deliberately done to exclude women. It's not like a thing that's put in place. And I think the thing that really maybe diminishes your argument is 2 words: Claudia Webb. And that was, I believe, a deliberately, consciously all-female shortlist. And frankly, she's the worst MP that I can remember in recent times.
Well, we're not advocating all women shortlists.
Right.
We are just saying this is what we should all be aspiring to. What gets measured gets managed. And we need to be drawing upon the widest possible pool of talent, and that needs to include the 32 million women that live and work in the UK. So the recruitment procedures and the institution needs to be attractive to intelligent women. And I would argue that women should be given the opportunity to experience what it's like to stand for selection, and therefore you should at least have 50-50 selection candidates, a selection list, so that the selection committees also get used to seeing female candidates. It's about presenting the opportunity and everybody understanding what intelligent women look like when they're standing for selection.
OK, good stuff. All right, well, look, thank you very, very much for your time this morning. It's been great to have you on the show and get your views on this. Goes Francis Scott there, of course, founder and director of 50/50 Parliament. Yeah, look, I'm not a fan of all women shortlists. I'm not a fan of, all whatever shortlists, really. I think just,
if you're good, more often than not, you should be able to prove yourself. I can attest to that. I've been around privately educated sort of middle-class people for a lot of my educational life, and I've proven myself, I think, on my own merits. So I think you can if you want to.
Indeed, right. These views have been flooding in GBViews at GBnews.uk. My favourite so far is from a chap called Mike, and it's in relation to the Porngate scandal, where the individual in question there, Mr Parrish, tried to claim, at least, or a source close to him anyway, tried to claim that he was looking for Dominator combine harvesters and accidentally found himself watching porn in the House of Commons. Mike's had a very similar experience, he says. Patrick, it happens. I went online to look for a dominatrix, and now I'm the proud owner of a brand new combine harvester. And I think this is just fantastic stuff, so thank you very much, Mike.
Another good joke I saw, which I'll tell you after this break. And after the break, we'll be chatting to royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliam about reports that Prince William, plans a drastic modernisation of the monarchy following what's been a tumultuous few years, of course, for the royal family. That's after this, the weather.
Yes.
Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking rather cloudy to start with some fog. It'll turn brighter but also showery. Let's get the details. Starting off in the southwest, and this morning's cloud is set to linger until lunchtime for many, with a few spots of drizzly rain, feeling markedly warmer than yesterday though. It's also looking mostly cloudy across much of the southeast and around London. It'll be mostly dry, and any early fog should have cleared. It's a different story for Wales. Here the cloud is going to break up, allowing for some sunny breaks, but also a scattering of showers. It's looking similar across many parts of the West Midlands. It'll be brightest for more northern parts, with more showers here. Meanwhile, further south the cloud is set to linger. Coastal parts of northeast England may have some lingering fog as we head through lunchtime and into this afternoon. Inland, things will be brighter, but a greater chance of some showers developing too. Whilst northern areas of Scotland are looking mostly fine with some lengthy bright periods, it will be more showery for central and southern parts, though still some sunny spells. There'll also be a mixture of sunny spells and scattered showers across Northern Ireland. Here temperatures are set to reach highs of around 15 Celsius. There'll be further showers as we head through the afternoon, with the cloud in the south breaking up. And that's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Yes, hello everybody. It's 10:23. This is To The Point with me, Patrick Christys. I'm Mercy Murokey on GB News Live, as ever, on your TV, online and radio this morning.
Yes, now, this weekend saw over 200 migrants cross the Channel following an 11-day hiatus attributed to unfavourable weather conditions, making the passage of dinghies too dangerous. While Nigel Farage is in the English Channel for us this morning and brings us this report.
11 days had passed without any boats crossing the English Channel, no dinghies whatsoever, which has led to a lot of commentary from many people saying, Rwanda works, they've stopped coming. Now, I think actually this is sort of wishful thinking, because everybody wants an end to this crisis. It's wrong at every level. Tough words from Boris Johnson on this issue the other week. But the truth is, the reason boats haven't come for the last 11 days is there's been a persistent northeasterly wind, averaging about 20 miles an hour, leading to very, very short, choppy seas, difficult, unpleasant for any boat, let alone an inflatable dinghy. That's why they didn't come. Yesterday was the first calm day. We haven't got the official figures, and that's because it's a bank holiday weekend, but we're told over 200 came yesterday. My intel says 260 or 270 on 6 or 7 boats. What is interesting to note, since I first started coming here a couple of years ago, in those days, the inflatable ribs would carry on average about 16, maybe 18 people. Now, they're purpose-built, once only, one journey only boats, averaging about 40 people. So far this morning, there have been several sightings, mostly to the west of where we are right now. We are literally right in between the British and French waters, out in what's called the separation zones, and I'm sure within the next hour or two we're going to start seeing more dinghies. It's going to be flat calm all week. Remember, before that 11 days when nobody came, the numbers that were running at 4 times the number that came last year. It is not an exaggeration to suggest that if we carry on as we are, it'll be 100,000 people that cross the English Channel this year, and 90,000 of them will be young men without any documents whatsoever. So look, I want Rwanda to work, but is it going to work? It already faces its first legal challenge. My suspicion is, all the while we're part of the Human Rights Act, all the while we have the European Convention on Human Rights into British law, it's going to be very, very difficult to send people to Rwanda. I mean, goodness me, it's even hard to deport known torturers and terrorists. So we're here, it's active. The Royal Navy now are in the Channel. This is one of the big announcements made by Boris Johnson the other week. From what I can see, they're as good as useless. The sides of the boats, the gunnels of the boats are too high for them to pick anybody up, and they literally follow Border Force and RNLI around and then tow the empty dinghies back into Dover. We've seen drones this morning. I mean, it is a full-scale military operation going on in the Channel every single day when it's calm. There is no end in sight, but if we start to see plane loads of people going to Rwanda, that would act as a serious deterrent. After all, why would you pay a trafficker €5,000 if you thought you'd finish up in Rwanda? So this is back on. I would predict this week be very surprising if not more than 1,000. Yeah, I'd say more than 1,000 will come this week.
Yes, Nigel, thank you very much for that report. Now, I think maybe I was guilty of jumping the gun a little bit when it came to Rwanda. I gave quite a big barnstorming statement on Friday evening for Friday Night Feast, 7 to 9 p.m, cheeky plug, but saying, look, it's only gone and worked. We've had no crossings now for 11 days. And yes, I did accept that the weather had something to do with that, but I was hoping that maybe it would be more of the deterrent factor. I think this now, as Nigel said, that is going to be Rwanda's biggest test, or Rwandan policy's biggest test. If we're seeing people come over now, we don't know that they might have been told about this Rwanda deal. Yeah. Goodness knows what the people smugglers are saying to them. We have to start seeing planes with people going to Rwanda soon. Otherwise, this thing's a dud.
Yeah, I think it still has time to prove itself as the deterrent that the Home Office and the government want it to be. But let's move on for now, on to royal news. Prince William has reportedly held a crisis meeting with aides as he plans to modernise the monarchy. The future of the royal family and the Commonwealth came under scrutiny after the the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge's tour of the Caribbean, which was almost overshadowed by backlash and protests over colonialism and slavery from a minority.
Yes.
While the royals have had a difficult few years, the sudden departure of Prince Harry and Meghan, of course, and all the furore around that, Prince Andrew's out-of-court settlement in a sex abuse case, and, of course, the death of their grandfather, the Duke of Edinburgh, last year.
Yes, indeed. Well, joining us now is Richard Fitzwilliams, royal commentator. Richard, obviously, it has been a very difficult period for the royals, hasn't it? I think, should we start with some of the good news and then talk about some of the bad news? So Meghan Markle's been biffed by Netflix, hasn't she? Talk to me about that.
Well, it follows. This was a deal in 2020, and it was estimated by the New York Times that the Sussexes would get $100 million from a deal with Netflix, and they'd be producing a variety of programs, and so far they haven't produced much. The Heart of Invictus, which will follow competitors at Harry's games, which, credit to him, he did extremely well and founded that. That is out soon, but Meghan had the intention of producing an animated series based on influential women about a girl, Pearl, who was inspired by them, and that has now been shelved because Netflix they face dire forecasts. Their shares have been in free fall. It's somewhat of a crisis. It was unexpected. Now, the question must be, what precisely will they want from the royal couple, given the fact that they've only producing one series, and that is on Invictus. What else? Perhaps something military from Harry, I merely suggest, or Meghan was a thespian, possibly something along that line. Facts are that they were very pleased to have royals, and also, of course, they produced The Crown, which is a very variable merit, I would add, and there are things seriously wrong with it, but it does very well commercially. So you must ask, what will they demand or ask, and whether it's something with royal input. This would be very, very hypersensitive, and it's not at all clear how the couple could deliver.
No. There was a really interesting point that Prince Harry... Well, I have to say this with a pinch of salt. There was a really interesting point that Prince Harry made in that Oprah interview where he did actually say, look, Meghan Markle, of course, essentially as a black woman, as it were, could have actually played a role in the royal family, and certainly when it comes to things like the Caribbean tours. We've seen accusations there, really, of, it's not gone down too well with the locals, I suppose you could say. Maybe this is an argument that... There is an argument to say that they had a point there, actually, that Meghan Markle could have been a good ambassador for the royal family abroad in certain countries, and that isn't going to happen now.
Oh, well, I mean, there is no question at all that the departure of the Sussexes was disastrous for the royal family, because the potential, especially given the fact that they had such appeal to young people, and especially also given the fact that the vast majority of people in the Commonwealth are young and are persons of colour. But the fact that Meghan was a person of colour, that she was a divorcee, that she's American and a former actress, but I mean, I thought, knew the ropes as far as anyone could. Of course, that proved wrong. But the facts were that the potential there was marvellous. And of course, Harry was so popular, and the brothers, we thought, were absolutely inseparable. How wrong we all were.
Indeed.
And just very finally, we mentioned there in the introduction that Prince William could modernise the monarchy. I just wanted to know, what does modernising the monarchy mean exactly in practice? I don't particularly think it needs to be modernised. It has a lot of support, but what would that look like if it was?
Well, I mean, this is just simply a phrase that's been employed in articles to make it clear that they absorbed some of the lessons of the Caribbean tour. I mean, when William says he won't automatically be head of the Commonwealth, the point is there is no other head of the Commonwealth, practically speaking. You couldn't have the Secretary-General, he's just a bureaucrat, and if you had a rotating head, you could have a dictatorship such as Sri Lanka or the Gambia. That wouldn't work at all. So it's got to be the British monarch. In reality, if the Commonwealth is to continue with the precise sort of meaning that it has, I know it's a loose association of 54 states. So far as what William might actually plan to do, I mean, that's a matter for the future. But of course, every monarch has their own style and has their own priorities. But there is, of course, the constitutional aspect, and that is not likely to change that much.
All right, Richard, thank you very much. Good stuff. That Richard Fitzwilliam's royal expert, royal commentator, whizzing you through what has been a big week of news for the royals, big weekend of news for the royals.
How would you modernise the monarchy?
I'd just try and find a way of keeping the Queen alive.
Turn the national anthem into like a grime.
Yeah, get Paul McCartney or Stormzy. Get Stormzy to reinvent the national anthem. There we go. Anyway, it's been 40 years anyway since the sinking of the General Belgrano by the British nuclear-powered submarine HMS Conqueror, aptly named, during the Falklands War. And our Home and Security editor has a special report after this break. But before that, let's take a look at this morning's news.
Good morning, it's 10:34. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. In Ukraine, Mariupol officials say Russia resumed shelling the besieged steel plant in the city as soon as buses carrying civilians fleeing the plant had left. Ukraine's President Zelensky says the first group of evacuees will arrive in a Ukrainian-held city today. Footage shows them emerging from the plant's rubble and being led to waiting coaches. One woman said she and her baby have been waiting for 2 months to be rescued. The UK's Ministry of Defence says it's likely that more than a quarter of Russia's battalion tactical groups in Ukraine are now combat ineffective. UK intelligence says it will probably take years for Russia to reconstitute these forces. A record 2.7 million people have been referred for cancer checks over the last year. NHS data shows the number of patients receiving treatment for cancer has risen by 2,000 since the start of the pandemic. More than 250 people were detected crossing the Channel in small boats yesterday, according to the Ministry of Defence. No crossings were recorded at the end of April amid reports of bad weather, strong wind and choppy seas. Well, some people have been seen today in the Channel. The Minister for Higher and Further Education, Michelle Donlan, is rejecting calls to introduce an all-women shortlist to replace the former MP Neil Parish. Parish sparked a by-election in his Tiverton and Honiton constituency after he resigned after admitting to watching pornography in the comments. Some Conservatives had suggested that a female candidate should replace him. Conservative MP Crispin Blunt has announced he'll stand down at the next election. Last month, the former Justice Minister apologised after he tweeted in support of an MP who was found guilty of sexually assaulting a 15-year-old boy. Blunt originally claimed the MP Imran Ahmed Khan was the victim of a dreadful miscarriage of justice before then issuing an apology. You're up to date on GB News. We're on your TV, online and DAB+ radio. Stay with us. To the point, Patrick and Mercy will be back shortly.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's 2 questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning, it's 10:38. This is To The Point with me, Mercy Moroki, and Patrick Christie's on GB News. Thanks for joining us on this Bank Holiday Monday. We're live on your TV, online and radio.
Yes, indeed. Right, now, one of the commanders of a British submarine which sank a key Argentinian warship during the Falklands War says he stands by the decision to attack the vessel. Today marks the 40th anniversary of the sinking of the General Belgrano by the British nuclear-powered submarine HMS Conqueror, with the loss of 323 lives. Now, it proved to be the most controversial moment in the conflict with Argentina, claiming that it was an illegal act because the Belgrano was allegedly sailing away from the conflict zone and returning to port.
Yes, well, our Home and Security editor, Mark White, has this special report.
There was a cheer as we heard the explosion, and the captain reported from the periscope seeing it, because we had done what our government tasked us to do, and we were very professional about it. Followed almost instantaneously with absolute silence, and as everyone had their own thoughts, thinking there were over 1,000 sailors on board the Belgrano, and they were doing what their government tasked them to do.
It's 40 years since Vice Admiral Sir Tim McClement was a young lieutenant commander in the Royal Navy, second in command of the submarine HMS Conqueror, as it shadowed and then fired on the Argentinian cruiser General Belgrano. It was one of the most controversial episodes in the Falklands War, with claims the Belgrano was sailing away from a 200-mile UK-imposed exclusion zone around the islands. But Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher agreed with her senior military commanders that the Belgrano posed a direct threat to the Royal Navy Task Force heading for the South Atlantic.
Admiral Woodward had 2 carriers and not very many Harriers, and the Argentinians had over 200 aircraft, so we had to protect our carriers, because if we lost one, then that would be the end of our ability to retake the islands. And at the time, on the beginning of May, Admiral Woodward believed there was a pincer movement with the Argentinian aircraft carrier to the northwest of the islands, coming with his escorting destroyers, and to the southwest of the islands, the Belgrano group with two destroyers as well.
The Belgrano, which began life as the American light cruiser USS Phoenix, had survived Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor, only to succumb to 2 Royal Navy torpedoes. 323 Argentinians died on board the Belgrano. This notorious Sun headline at the time was later toned down as the extent of the loss of life became apparent.
It was the big turning point. They knew from that moment, I can remember being told, I was with the troops in the Canberra at the time, that this had happened. And within 2 days, of course, the Sheffield was sunk. And everybody in charge knew there was going to be a real war. Whatever talks might or might not happen, there was going to be a real war, and they realised there were still going to be problems, big problems.
Safeguarding the Royal Navy Task Force was at the heart of the decision to sink the Belgrano. Vice Admiral McClement says the actions of those on board HMS Conqueror were fully justified.
One regrets loss of life in war. Galtieri had invaded the islands. He needed to be evicted, and you use brutal force to try and shorten the war as quickly as possible so that you succeed. The Belgrano was a threat, needed to be taken out, and we did it.
There's no doubt the sinking of the Belgrano was a decisive moment in the Falklands conflict, as the Argentinian Navy retreated to port and played no further part in the war. Mark White, GB News.
Yeah, such a tough decision to be made there, but I think undoubtedly the right one in the end. At the end of the day, we are at war. We were at war. And, you know, just because it's sailing away from a conflict zone, I think it's been very difficult to look into the eyes of the family members of some of those British naval crew members there. If they'd have been sunk by that ship and we'd not we'd not sunk it first, I think.
Yes, well, from that conflict to another, civilian evacuations from the besieged city of Mariupol will resume this morning, and Speaker of the US House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi, has led a congressional delegation to Kiev and promised American support until the fight is done, and says Congress will move quickly to approve £33 billion in aid for Ukraine.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's it. We can all go home now. Fantastic stuff. Nancy Pelosi's been sent over to Kiev and the whole conflict has gone away forever. So thank you, Nancy. Cheers for that. But, yes, of course, over the weekend it was reported that 2 British men volunteering to provide humanitarian assistance in Ukraine were captured by the Russian military. So Paul Urey from Warrington and Dylan Healy from Cambridgeshire are said to have been working independently, but were in touch with the non-profit Presidium Network.
Yes, well, joining us now is Dominic Byrne, who is founder of the Presidium Network, which is a non-profit supporting communities in crisis who have been in touch with the men before their capture. Good morning. Thank you so much for coming on to give us an update on this. I mean, what can you tell us about what has happened?
So basically what we know is that they were heading towards a Russian-controlled zone, trying to help a woman and her 2 children to be evacuated. We know that it was on Monday they were heading into that region. We know that they managed to get over the Ukrainian last checkpoint before they entered Russian territory. However, we also know they never made it to the house. We know that the women, around 24 hours after they were supposed to be there, actually had what she reported as Russian soldiers entering to the house and asking about these 2 British men that she was working with, and actually used Paul's name and in that interrogation. We also know that Paul and Dylan were working with a UK informal group. We found out on Saturday through one of the translators that worked for that group. It was an open Facebook group trying to help people come into the UK from Ukraine, and a number of that group were was actual formal sponsors under the UK government programme. And we know that they were trying to take it on their own terms to find families in Ukraine to support, and we're also helping with the evacuations. We also now know from an interview we did with one of the group members on Saturday is that about 24 hours before Paul and Dylan were supposed to be picking up this woman, that they were involved. The group were involved in another evacuation from that same town, and also was being used. A local driver was being used to take out, and it was successful. And they were reporting back, and we heard that the group actually reported to Paul and Dylan that they were the route to take, and we believe they were trying to take a certain route to the town, and we believe they were captured most likely between the Ukrainian checkpoint and the Russian first checkpoint.
OK, all right, that's interesting. I've just been given some notes, really, which appear to say that there's some concern, clearly, for the health of Mr Urey, because apparently his mother says that he's got type 1 diabetes, he'll need insulin. I mean, have we got any updates on this?
Well, so yes, we do know that from his mum that yes, he is type 1 diabetes. We have been making calls publicly and also through the government, the British government, for making sure that he gets his medication. And we can't comment on on any progression at the moment, but we do believe that we've given enough information to the government and to the media for them to be looking after them properly. So we really hope they are, but we don't actually have any specific information on how they're being held at the moment.
Well, of course, we wish Paul and Dylan all the best, and please come back again in the future to provide us further updates. We hope, of course, it will be a good news update. So, Dominic Byrne, thank you so much for joining us, founder there of the Presidium Network, which is a charity that has been in touch with the two.
Indeed. Right. OK, gosh. Well, moving on to COVID-19 now. Bill Gates, the Microsoft billionaire, has warned that the worst of the pandemic could still be on its way. Read the room, Bill. The tech mogul told the Financial Times, we're still at risk of this pandemic generating a variant that will be even more transmissive and even more fatal. It's not likely. I don't want to be a voice of doom and gloom. Why say it then, some would argue. But it's way above 5% risk that this pandemic, we haven't even seen the worst of it.
Oh, wow.
Backed by unpopular demand.
Way to kill the mood, eh?
Yeah.
So is there any truth to this at all? Or despite Bill Gates' best efforts, is it all just doom and gloom? Well, it sounds like it, doesn't it? By Dr. Claire Craig, who's co-chair of the Heart Group, which is an organisation comprised of doctors, scientists, psychologists and other academic experts who analyse policy and guidance relating to COVID, joins us now. Thank you for your time. How right is Bill Gates, or is he just talking about the worst case scenario, really?
Thanks very much for having me on. I would say that with respiratory viruses, what we know is that when you have a bad winter, it's usually followed by a good one, and then that's followed by a bad one. That's the way it goes, and it's because when you've had a bad winter, you have fewer vulnerable people left in the population the following winter, which is what we've seen this winter, as well as, of course, Omicron being much, much less dangerous. But yes, there's every chance that if we have another variant, it could be a worse winter than we've just seen this time. There's a possibility of that happening. The point is, what do we do about that? So Bill Gates has just published a book and is pushing this idea that it's all about mask wearing and we all need to wear masks still, which is not an evidence-based position to take. And he's not the person qualified to make those comments either. So with COVID, the problem we have is that it spreads through the air. Now, when you're next to somebody who's infected, you're more likely to be around infected air. But between about 40% and maybe 30% at an extreme of people who catch COVID never have a source identified for where they got it from. And that's because although you're more risk when you're near someone infected, once it's in the air, then it can spread through the air to people that you've never met.
OK.
And so it's basically impossible to control that. Now, Bill Gates, he's a computer expert.
This is it. Thank you. Yes.
Yes.
But could just drill down into that. How annoyed are you? How annoyed are you at the likes of Bill? Who is this Bill Gates? I don't want to sound like, too much like Nicky Graham. Who is he? Who is he? But, I mean, who is he? He's a computer engineer. Great, brilliant at that. Well done, Bill. Gone on to make a series of very sound investments and amass a huge personal fortune. He is not an epidemiologist or a medical professional, is he?
And we could pretend that he's got expertise in stopping computer viruses, where you've got a situation where every time there's a virus infection, there is a definite moment of intervention. You've connected your computer to something new. You could have intervened at that point to stop a virus infecting your computer. He completely failed on that. He's completely failed with computer viruses. So why on earth are we listening to him about human viruses?
That's a really good point, actually. That's a really good point. And do you think there's a certain arrogance here? The likes of Bill Gates, who think because he's been very successful in one area of his life and amassed a huge personal fortune, he's seen as this kind of like wise old sage who must have essentially the keys to human intellect in our universe. And actually, Bill Gates will know about as much as COVID-19 as the next person, presumably.
Yeah, and we're so used to people being completely discredited and being put down and being told they're not qualified to speak on it. And yet here the press are constantly listening to him when he really isn't qualified to speak on it. And you can't help feeling that he's surrounded himself by yes men. And so he has, huge belief that he knows that everything that he knows is right. He never gets challenged.
Yeah, and I think as well, so with a lot of these people, when they become almost above the wider population, so there's so much money and they do operate on a different echelon to the rest of us, I wonder whether they see themselves as almost like having a duty to be human caregivers in a way. Something like this happens, he goes, right, it's on me now as this massive global figure to sort out all of the world's problems. And actually, no, I'd rather you did make better computers. But anyway, Dr. Claire Craig, thank you very, very much. Co-chair of the Heart Group, there, an organisation comprised of actual doctors, actual scientists and actual experts.
I think you are being a bit unfair because he does, of course, have the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. He does invest massively in lots of humanitarian things, which often includes disease prevention and finding medications and vaccines for diseases across the world, and usually the third world, so he's not entirely clueless about this kind of thing. But as you say, he isn't a virologist or an epidemiologist, so maybe he should shut up for now.
Well, there we go. Right, OK. Now, let's take you through some of the stories that you might have missed. So we're going to go... Science has long linked frequent pornography viewing to a worse sex life among men. But what outcomes does it have for women? Well, it turns out that the opposite occurs.
Yes, well, surveying 100,000 people, so quite a big sample size, a study from Psychological Medicine's journal found that when men watch pornography, they exhibit doubts and anxieties about their performance, leading to a poorer sexual life with their female partners. But when women watch porn, they're sexually inspired and they exhibit higher feelings of sexual competence and have a better sex life with their male partners. Not very surprising to me.
No, I think, you know, there's that old famous kind of Ed Byrne joke, isn't there, of, you know, a couple watching that kind of material and then being like, right, should we just go upstairs and disappoint each other, you know? So I think that's... I think I can understand why men may feel slightly intimidated by some...
I feel a bit sorry for men sometimes because they do have... I know we often talk about women having to live up to the standards of the women you tend to see in that kind of adult content. But men also have some pressures as well. I mean, I won't go into detail. I know there are kids at home because it's a bank holiday. But, you know, men are expected to look a certain way in adult content as well. And the vast majority of men simply don't. No. And they don't have the stamina, quite frankly, that those men have.
Not every man can look like me. But anyway, cash-strapped families are having to rent coffins, OK, right, gosh, shifting tone here, to bury their loved ones in the latest evidence of just how devastating the cost of living is.
Yes, well, the average cost... Oh, sorry.
No, it's all right. You carry on. I'm a bit bemused by this.
In the UK does tend to run into the thousands of pounds, with coffins seen as a major part of this expense. In fact, the cheapest wooden coffin offered by Co-op Funeral Care, which is, of course, a very popular provider, is still £450. So to help make funerals more affordable, the National Association of Funerals Directors say that an increasing number of funeral homes have installed a removable liner in their caskets. Really morbid stuff. So they can be rented and reused. You know, these are the sorts of things you don't really think about.
I'm going to have to delve into this. Sorry, I might be being a bit thick here. I just don't get how this works. So you get buried in a coffin, and what happens?
I think that the removable liner, so you would be put on the liner, the body, and then, that's what I'm assuming. I mean, I haven't looked to it in detail, but it's really depressing, actually, isn't it? It's bad enough having a loved one pass away, and then most people, they never think about the costs associated with that. And if coffins, I mean, the cheapest one's $450. That's a big cost for people who haven't planned for that.
Absolutely, yeah, no. Well, we've got time just for one very quick one now. So a Pennsylvania high school has put a teacher on leave after she hosted an erotic drag show for the school's Gay Straight Alliance club without informing parents.
Well,
good grief.
Videos of the drag show for 14 to 18-year-old high schoolers has gone viral, showing the drag queens dancing, dropping and crawling on stage in, well, barely any clothing. Well, the queer teacher and GSA Club co-advisor who invited the drag queen said she felt the sheer joy that the beautiful role models could come to the school. You find this hilarious.
It's absolutely hilarious.
I think he's laughing at a video we're playing for our radio viewers. We're playing a video of some of the erotic...
It's a drag show for kids!
Well, the school released a statement saying neither the dress nor performance was appropriate in our school setting, and the teacher has been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. And we are now going to go to the headlines while Patrick regains his composure. So stay with us.
Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking rather cloudy to start with some fog. It'll turn brighter but also showery. Let's get the details. Starting off in the southwest, and this morning's cloud is set to linger until lunchtime for many, with a few spots of drizzly rain, feeling markedly warmer than yesterday though. It's also looking mostly cloudy across much of the southeast and around London. It'll be mostly dry and any early fog should have cleared. It's a different story for Wales. Here the cloud is going to break up, allowing for some sunny breaks, but also a scattering of showers. It's looking similar across many parts of the West Midlands. It'll be brightest for more northern parts with more showers here. Meanwhile, further south the cloud is set to linger. Coastal parts of northeast England may have some lingering fog as we head through lunchtime and into this afternoon. Inland, things will be brighter, but a greater chance of some showers developing too. Whilst northern areas of Scotland are looking mostly fine with some lengthy bright periods, it will be more showery for central and southern parts, though still some sunny spells. There'll also be a mixture of sunny spells and scattered showers across Northern Ireland. Here temperatures are set to reach highs of around 15 Celsius. There'll be further showers as we head through the afternoon, with the cloud in the south breaking up. And that's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning, everybody. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick Christie's. I'm Mercy Moroki on your TV, radio and online, with you all the way through until midday with an action-packed show full of all today's biggest stories, loads of discussion and expert guests, as well as your views.
Yes, indeed. And you can get in touch with those views on GBViews at GBnews.uk. We haven't gone to many of them, have we? But we promise we will be throughout this hour. But first, here's your latest news.
Good morning, it's 11 o'clock. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date today on GB News. In some breaking news, at least 180 people have been intercepted on small boats in the English Channel this morning in a second day of crossings. So far, the Border Force has spotted 6 vessels. Today's activity comes after the Ministry of Defence confirmed that 254 people arrived in 7 small boats on Sunday. That follows 11 days where there were no crossings. There were strong winds and choppy seas that are believed to have been a factor. In international news, Mariupol officials say Russia resumed shelling the steelworks plant as soon as buses carrying civilians fleeing had left. Ukraine's President Zelensky says the first group of evacuees will arrive in a Ukrainian-held city today. Footage shows them emerging from the plant's rubble and being led to waiting coaches. One woman said she and her baby had been waiting for 2 months. Former military intelligence officer Frank Luij told us the siege in Mariupol will continue for some time.
The idea that the Russians have any kind of concern at all for the care and health of non-combatants, and of course they don't. If it suits their purposes, there may be some kind of supply. I personally doubt it. That's not the idea of siege. President Putin quite publicly gave the order that not a fly should be getting into the Azovstal complex. And the siege will continue, and it may continue for some time. It will continue essentially till the Azovstal defenders run out of food, water and ammunition.
The UK's Ministry of Defence says it's likely more than a quarter of Russia's battalion tactical groups in Ukraine are now combat ineffective. UK intelligence says it will probably take years for Russia to reconstitute these forces. In some other news now, a senior Conservative is rejecting calls to introduce an all-women shortlist to replace the former MP Neil Parish. Well, Parish sparked a by-election in his Tiverton and Honiton constituency after he resigned, having admitted watching pornography in the Commons. Some Conservatives had suggested that a female candidate replace him. The Minister for Higher and Further Education, Michelle Donlan, told GB News women just need support.
I find quotas demeaning to women. Women can certainly get there on their own merit. We've seen that with 2 female prime ministers in my own party. We have a Home Secretary who's female, a Foreign Secretary who's female. What we need to be doing is encouraging women to come forward to stand, removing the barriers, which we have been doing with organisations such as Women to Win, led by Baroness Jenkins. But imposing these arbitrary quotas does nobody any favours, in particular women.
The Conservative MP Crispin Blunt has announced he'll stand down at the next election. Last month, the former Justice Minister apologised for causing significant upset and concern after he tweeted to show support for an MP who was found guilty of sexually assaulting a 15-year-old boy. Blunt originally claimed the MP, Imran Ahmed Khan, was the victim of a dreadful miscarriage of justice, before then issuing an apology. A record 2.7 million people have been referred for cancer checks over the last year. NHS data shows the number of patients receiving cancer treatment has risen by 2,000 since the start of the pandemic. The NHS says it's expanded its services diagnostic capabilities with one-stop shops for tests and mobile clinics. The director of the Barts Cancer Centre, Tom Powles, told GB News the NHS needs more staff.
Cancer remains our number one killer, will be in the future, and now we have this huge healthcare problem. Do we have the resource to deal with it, which is your question? The human resource we probably don't have right now. We continue to work through this pandemic. We have shortage of doctors and nurses. We put adverts out, but we don't have the resource in the UK as it currently stands to fill those posts. Many people left during the pandemic. Being a nurse, being a doctor during this difficult time was very challenging.
New research warns that delays in passport processing could cost over £1 billion in cancelled trips this summer. Research from the Centre for Economics and Business estimates there's currently a 50% probability of people having a successful and timely passport renewal. The Passport Office advises to apply 10 weeks in advance due to the delays. The Prime Minister's considering giving housing association tenants the right to buy. The Telegraph is reporting that Boris Johnson has asked officials to draw up plans to help young people struggling to get onto the property ladder in England. Freddie Poser of the campaign group Priced Out says the government simply needs to build more homes.
This wouldn't help solve the housing crisis. The housing crisis is fundamentally one of supply. We need to find a world where we're building enough houses. Playing around with things like right to buy for housing associations will simply mean that there's less social and affordable rent properties available in 5 years, assuming we don't build them.
You're up to date on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to the point.
Good morning. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Moroki, and Patrick Christie's on your TV, radio and online. We're here for another hour until midday. Here's what's on the menu.
Right, well, Boris Johnson allegedly handed out a Sexist of the Year prize at a lockdown-breaking party. As this latest story of sleazy MPs' behaviours hits the newsstands, we ask, is there a lad culture at Westminster that needs to be cleared up?
Yes, and another Boris story. Boris Becker starts the week from his Victorian jail cell. We ask a psychologist how well stars like him tend to cope from going to riches to rags.
And as Thursday's local elections fast approach, our Culture and Social Affairs editor Inaya Folarin-Iman has a special report on what role the culture wars will play in British elections.
Yes, and we want to hear your views as well on everything we've been discussing today, so get in touch with those views, gbviews@gbnews.uk.
But first, Mercy is going to deliver yet another epic monologue about LGBT books and the state of our schools.
Teachers at a Catholic boys' school have gone on strike after religious leaders in the borough cancelled a talk by a gay author who was due to give a talk on his LGBTQ-themed books. Simon James Green has written 12 books for children and young adults focused around these LGBT+ characters. His works include Gay Club, a novel about a group of queer teens, Alex in Wonderland, a book about a young boy who falls for another boy who has a girlfriend, a play, of course, of Alice in Wonderland. Heartbreak Boys, the story of two newly dumped gay male teens who essentially team up to make their exes jealous and get over their heartbreak. Now, I have not read these books, so I can't speak to their plot lines in details, and I absolutely have nothing against the books or this author per se. I'm sure they're well written. I'm sure many young people have resonated with them. The author would not be as successful as he is if this were not the case. But here's where I draw the line. These teachers going on strike over the fact that this author is not allowed to come in to discuss his LGBT books are completely, unequivocally wrong. And here's why. It's wrong to force the school to close and for children to lose their education because they don't like the fact that children will not get to hear about the queer stories from this author. This is a Catholic school, after all, for goodness sakes. What did they expect when they were signing up for the job? The Diocesan Schools Commissioners, Dr. Simon Hughes, who told the school to cancel the visit, had this to say, and I quote, "From time to time, materials or events emerge for consideration that fall outside the scope of what is permissible in a Catholic school. In such circumstances, we have no alternative but to affirm our unequivocal and well-known theological and moral precepts and to act in accordance with them." And I think that's fair enough. The Archdiocese of Southwark also made this comment. Literature which insults the faith, which in the case of Mr. Green's book was a highly sexualised rewriting of the Lord's Prayer, understandably causes offence to many Christians and as such has no place in a Catholic school. Again, that's fair enough, and that should be the bottom line. The fact that this has caused such a furore at the school is frankly quite bizarre. 40 teachers' union members protested outside the schools, 2 school governors resigned. Teachers have, as I said, walked out, with resulting staff shortages actually leading to the school having to close. Those protesting this say it sends a damaging message to the LGBTQ+ community, that it reeks of homophobia and transphobia. I think that's disingenuous at best because here are the facts. The religious heads have not cancelled the authors because he is gay. Now, that would be homophobic. They've cancelled his visit because the book's contents don't align with their own religious teachings. Are we a Christian country which upholds religious freedoms or not? He also has no right to speak at the school, this author. He was invited as a guest. He's hardly part of the national curriculum, is he? There's also the fact that the school are not banning their pupils from accessing these materials. If students or parents want to buy or read these books in a private capacity, well, they're completely free to do so, as should be the case. Look, ultimately, my point is this. As far as I'm concerned, teaching children about sex, when it comes to schools and classrooms, should focus on the necessary facts and safeguarding issues. It should focus on biological facts, biological processes around sex, puberty and reproduction. Children should be taught the basics about stranger danger, that consent is crucial, and that individuals, couples and families come in all shapes and sizes. Spare the poor kids all the over-sexualised literature, ideologies, please. It's up to parents and parents only how much detail and exploration young children should have about the issues of homosexuality, issues of transgenderism, and issues of sexual pleasure and preferences. That's the bottom line, and I think that should remain the bottom line.
I mean, look, you know, I've got no problem with gay books whatsoever. I mean, some of my favourite books are gay. But I do think, though, that you know, in terms of being a Catholic school, right, a Catholic high
I wouldn't
school,
quit your day job.
Yeah, no, fine. But in terms of being Catholic, you know, so what do you expect, you know? Like, I mean, so what? It doesn't, I mean, you wouldn't get the same... It wouldn't be the same kind of protest, would there, at certain other religious sect schools, you know?
Yeah, you know, I just think if you've sent your kid to a private... Look, there are parents who will want their children to read these books. Perfectly fine. Buy your children the books. Read the books to your children. I just don't think, you know, these teachers striking, they shouldn't be forcing the school, as a Catholic school, to have this material and to expose children to this material, which the religious leaders of the schools obviously think is contrary to
Yeah.
Catholic Christian beliefs and ideas.
I think there's probably a wider issue, which is that a lot of Catholic schools now are not actually very Catholic, right? So you get they don't just take people who are Catholics; they take people who are from all religions. Certainly, one of the local ones where I was growing up was very much not an exclusively Catholic school, and so I wonder whether or not that's kind of diluting the Catholic message there, and therefore why we end up with issues like this potentially.
Yes, and I think in those cases it would be for those religious leaders to make sure that is being upheld, and maybe this is their way of doing so. Well, let's speak to somebody else now who knows a lot about this issue. Joining us is Conservative campaign group Citizens Go UK and Ireland campaign director Caroline Farrow, who is a columnist at Universe Catholic Weekly. As a Catholic, thank you for coming on to our show. As a Catholic, I don't know if you have kids or if you send them to Catholic school, but if you did, how would you feel about this decision?
Well, I have got 5 kids, Mercy, and they all go to Catholic school. And one thing, I mean, you've talked about the blasphemous element of it, but also this book would be equally offensive if it had a heterosexual theme. So a lot of parents, whether they're religious or not, would really dislike this book, and there have been a lot of complaints about it. I've seen a lot of feminists complaining about it, and just a lot of ordinary mums and dads, because it's peddling smut. So if you took the protagonist of the book, who is a gay boy, and you made him, or you made him straight, or you made the protagonist a girl, it would be equally offensive because it's peddling smut and soft pornography. And such is the nature of what has been written. I couldn't even say it on a daytime show. I don't even like putting it out there on social media. I put it on a priest's page the other day when there was a debate going on, so people could see the nature of what was being said. And in the book, it's a younger pupil fantasizing about a sexual relationship with an older pupil. So it's someone under the age of consent fantasizing about sex with an older boy. And there's also, they talk about pornography, and again, I'm trying to be very careful about what I say. The language is vulgar, the language is smutty. If this was Jackie Collins, I mean, it's actually worse in some ways than Jackie Collins or Jilly Cooper. And if they were being promoted to teenage children, parents might well raise an eyebrow and say, well, what value has this literature got? So it's more than just it's kind of being the teachers who are on strike, which, as you say, is disgraceful. Actually, the teachers should either get back to work or be sacked. Now, let's remember that in a few weeks' time we have the first set of public examinations in 2 years. You've got year 11s sitting their GCSEs. You've got year 13s sitting their A levels, and the year 13s, incidentally, who are sitting their A levels won't have sat any GCSEs. So it's their first public examinations, and you've got these teachers going on strike. I can't express how angry I would be if I was a parent at this school.
I mean, from the content of what you said there, it does sound very much like 50 Shades of Gay, doesn't it, actually? But just in terms of actually the wider issue, potentially, whether it's about Catholic schools maybe losing some of their Catholic identity with some of the entry requirements, do you feel that that's potentially a problem here? Because let's be honest, we wouldn't be having this kind of conversation if it was relating to an Islamic school, would we? It just wouldn't be happening.
No, I don't think it's that, actually, Patrick. It's a good point and a very relevant point that you raised, that, a lot of Catholic schools don't have exclusively Catholic students, and a lot of parents of children of all faiths and none choose that Catholic school because they want that Catholic ethos. Actually, I think the problem here is in the governors and the foundation governors. So the reason why the diocese has removed the governors is because the foundation governors are supposed to uphold the Catholic ethos of that school. And I think somewhere along the lines, the Catholic school has been captured, to use a phrase I use a lot, but has been captured by LGBT ideology, has been captured by Stonewall, and schools are so very worried that they're going to fail their Ofsted because they're not ticking the relevant diversity boxes, that they kind of do whatever they can to show that they are LGBTQ plus IAP friendly. And actually there's no need to be doing this, particularly, as you say, in a Catholic school, which has has specific beliefs. You can easily teach children that families do come in all shapes and sizes. And in fact, it's key Catholic teaching that unjust discrimination should be avoided, that we should respect the dignity of every human life. And that should be at the core of every Catholic school. But there's no need, as Mercy says, to go into, detailed specifics about how to have a pleasurable sex life, which is sort of some of what this book has been sort of leaning into.
Yeah.
And it is almost grooming. It's kind of introducing, and bear in mind the age group that this book was, and the author was going to speak to, year 7s, year 8s. Now I've got a daughter in year 7, and I would be horrified. She's not emotionally ready for this kind of material. It was very, very explicit.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. A really interesting conversation there. Carolyn Farrow, campaign director at Citizen Go in UK and Ireland. I think that's the thing. Children mature at different ages, don't they? And so parents will know when their children are emotionally ready to hear about those sorts of things. And I think it should be left up to parents rather than schools.
I think so. I think so. I mean, I just think there's that fine line, isn't there, between some people maybe claiming, like, certain sexual proclivities are being forced on their children, or actually being open and tolerant of the fact that some children will have those sexual proclivities and don't want to make them feel like outsiders. And so it is an almost impossible balance to strike. But when I think you're doing things like we saw earlier about getting drag acts in schools...
Yeah, now that's inexcusable.
Some of the other things that I don't think I can say at this time in the morning about the primary schools in this country, I just question the need for it, really. I also find it a bit condescending because you can be gay and not want to be a drag act, I mean, some of these things are unnecessarily stereotypical and, dare I say it, all too often probably put in place by some rather well-meaning straight person who doesn't really quite understand the nuances of it all, I would have thought.
Yes. Well, you've been getting in touch with us, and we will be getting to those after a very short break, and we'll be back with the top story of the day, really, the so-called Westminster scandal, as an MP resigns for watching pornography in the Commons. So is there a misogyny problem in Westminster? Well, we'll discuss after this break.
Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking rather cloudy to start with some fog. It'll turn brighter but also showery. Let's get the details. Starting off in the southwest, and this morning's cloud is set to linger until lunchtime for many, with a few spots of drizzly rain, feeling markedly warmer than yesterday though. It's also looking mostly cloudy across much of the southeast and around London. It'll be mostly dry and any early fog should have cleared. It's a different story for Wales. Here the cloud is going to break up, allowing for some sunny breaks, but also a scattering of showers. It's looking similar across many parts of the West Midlands. It'll be brightest for more northern parts with more showers here. Meanwhile, further south the cloud is set to linger. Coastal parts of northeast England may have some lingering fog as we head through lunchtime and into this afternoon. Inland, things will be brighter, but a greater chance of some showers developing too. Whilst northern areas of Scotland are looking mostly fine with some lengthy bright periods, it will be more showery for central and southern parts, though still some sunny spells. There'll also be a mixture of sunny spells and scattered showers across Northern Ireland. Here temperatures are set to reach highs of around 15 Celsius. There'll be further showers as we head through the afternoon, with the cloud in the south breaking up. And that's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christys.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christys, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Good morning, everybody. It's 11:24. This is To The Point with me, Patrick Christys, and Mercy Moroki on GB News. We're live on your TV, online and radio this morning.
Yes, now the House of Commons Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, has called for radical action to overhaul Westminster's culture as concerns grow over sexism and inappropriate behaviour within Parliament. Well, Tory MP Neil Parish, as I'm sure you would have noticed, announced his resignation on Saturday after he confessed to watching pornography on 2 occasions in the House of Commons.
Yes, what a... No, we can't say that. Then, a Labour MP, Chris Bryant, told LBC Radio on Sunday how he was regularly touched up by older male colleagues when he was first elected to Parliament in 2001. And finally, Deputy Labour leader Angela Rayner is demanding answers from Boris Johnson over claims he awarded a Sexist of the Year title at a Partygate party.
Yes, well, joining us now is the former Labour MP for Ealing North, Stephen Pound, and Publican and Together campaigner, Adam Brooks. Thank you both for joining us this morning. Is there a misogyny problem in the House of Commons? Stephen, let's go to you first, since you've had first-hand experience in being an MP.
Oh. Yeah, I've had that experience. I haven't had some of the other experiences.
Yeah, I wanted to make that clear.
Thanks be to God. No, look, what there is, there's a sense of absolute entitlement amongst some people. There are some people who come into Parliament who honestly think that they're the masters or mistresses of the universe. They think they can absolutely do anything they want to, and that includes sort of groping, touching up, and all the other business. But the thing is, the reality is that we're now facing a very, very serious situation where public trust and confidence is below zero in politicians at the present time. I have to say, no coincidence since I left Parliament, but that's neither here nor there. And what we're now looking at is things like term limits. We're thinking like central human resources. But interestingly enough, Neil Parish's wife actually worked in his office. And in some cases, having your partner in your office is actually a good thing. Unfortunately, it means that if you want to watch porno, tractor porn, or whatever it is, you have to go and do it in the chamber of the House of Commons. So I'm not sure that's a good thing. But there isn't a sense of entitlement. There's a nasty, sleazy, murky, messy business down there, and it's going to take a lot of work to drain that swamp, to clean those Augean stables.
I think we're just going to stick with you, Stephen, for this second. I think we're just trying to get Adam back up there, but for want of a better phrase, given what we're talking about. But, do you think that there is a natural gravity towards power and politics and this and the other by people who are essentially sexual deviants?
Well, how the hell do you expect me to answer that? I mean, Henry Kissinger famously said that power is an aphrodisiac. And I have to say, for certain obvious physical reasons, I've never enjoyed that sense of power or aphrodisiac impact on my colleagues. But there is something about powerful people. But what it's also about is about self-advancement. I mean, when you're in Parliament, you're actually looking at 1,000 greasy poles that people really, really want to clamber up. And one way to do that, there are plenty of people, men and women, who feel that forming a relationship with somebody will actually be a way of advancing their own interests. And believe it or not, and what a surprise, there are people prepared to take advantage of that and imply that if you come and look at tractors with me, or, whatever is particularly the fancy of the day, you may well get some advancement. It's stupid, it's nonsense, because everybody knows who's looking after somebody else. But people still do it. It's not unique to Parliament. I would suggest that you get it in the armed forces, you get it in education, you get it in medicine. But in Parliament, we should be held to a slightly higher standard. We're supposed to make the laws, not break the laws, as I think you famously said about a week ago. And above all, we're supposed to set some sort of a standard. Neil Kinnock used to say that MP stood for man of principle. Nowadays, obviously, it stands for person of principle. But really and truly, we should be Caesar's wife on this. We should be pure. And I have to say, and it breaks my heart to say it, but by God, we've let the country down.
Yeah, maybe it's more fitting it stands for man of perversion these days rather than principle. But I did want to ask you this. What role does alcohol play in this? Because, there is a drinking culture, I think it's fair to say, in and around Westminster. And just over the weekend, Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng says it would be excessively puritanical for the bars to close the bars to address this problem. But I would suspect that a lot of these things happen under the influence of alcohol, or at least they exacerbate a lot of these sexual acts that go on in Parliament. What should be done about that?
Well, when I came into Parliament in 1997, there were 11 bars. There's about 3 now, and so that particular culture has changed massively. I can remember a policeman saying to me back in 1998, could you come and have a word with person X, who's about to get into his car, and he's quite clearly completely mullered. We can't take his keys off him because he's an MP. You can. Would you do that? So I went up and pushed him down. He fell over, didn't get up again. I took his car keys, hid them, went and put him on the floor of his office and picked him up in the morning. There was a lot of that, and that was pure to do with alcohol. And in many ways, that's actually changed. But there is a certain... Alcohol doesn't just have to be... a stimulant. It can also be a lubricant, in a way of talking to people, having contacts with people. And the funny thing is, Mercy, as soon as I got elected, one of the first letters I got is, when can I have a tour of the House of Commons? When can I have tea on the terrace? When can you buy me a drink in the Strangers Bar, in Annie's Bar, and places like that in the old days? Your constituents desperately want to be entertained. And I think it's yet another contradiction in politics. Is the parliamentarian a local constituency representative? Are they representative of their party? Are they a civic dignitary? Or is there a kind of social function there where you are the access point for your constituents who want to say, and they love it, they want to come into the House of Commons, they want to have a Pimm's, whatever it is they want to drink in the Strangers Bar, and talk about it for years after. You get the photographs, souvenir shop. I think that's changed. But one of the significant factors is, of course, today, over half the women MPs, the Labour women MPs, are women. Half Labour MPs are women. And whatever you say, I mean, I know there's one case at the present time of a woman who's been suspended for harassment, but the vast majority of this is, overweight, overage men, just really feeding their oats and just thinking that they're entitled to, just discuss agricultural implements, whatever it is they want to do. So I think having more women in the House is a good thing. And let's not forget, the Speaker's Conference is going to consider everything. It's going to consider term limits. It's going to consider maybe you can only be an MP for 8 years. It's going to consider things like, should you be able to employ your family? Should there be a central, human resource thing? All these things are on the table.
Okay.
It's probably going to be the biggest shake-up of Parliament since 1832.
All right, Stephen, thank you very, very much. Stephen Pound there, of course, former Labour MP for Ealing North. And unfortunately, we weren't able to get Adam on there, but we'll try and get him on tomorrow. He's, of course, a publican himself, so he will know a thing or two about maybe the way that people behave when they're inebriated, so we can maybe get him on that. But after the break, a psychologist will give us an insight into how former tennis star Boris Becker might be feeling as he starts his jail sentence for fraud. I think it's going to be really interesting. There's
But before that, views.
Oh, but before that, views, yes,
Let's
OK.
cram a couple in before getting ahead of yourself. Lots of comments coming in about the Catholic schools banning this gay book from being... Gay book sounds like a weird term. Book on gay relationships being in schools. Somebody here says they agree that this offending material is blasphemous and shouldn't be allowed in a Catholic school. Jana here says she's met the Catholic Archbishop and he's a thoroughly decent human being. She supports his decision. People pointing out to the double standards, particularly when it comes to if this was happening in a Muslim school, people might be less inclined to come out with it. Well, Terry Hill says that. And on 50-50 parliaments, 50% of women, jobs should be given on merit, not gender. And I think, you'd find many people who would agree with that you shouldn't just choose somebody or funnel somebody into a job because they happen to look a certain way or have two X chromosomes.
Certain characteristics and things like that, exactly. I think it diminishes it all, doesn't it? But there we go. Right, OK. Now, I've been doing some reading up on the state of the prison that Boris Becker is going to be staying in, and I'm quite fascinated to learn how people who've maybe had it all in life and have risen right to the very top, known extreme luxury, known extreme pleasure, extreme joy, will deal when they're put in the slammer, or, of course, in the case of Boris Becker, the Grand Slammer. But before that, let's have a look at this morning's news.
It's 11:33. Good morning. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. At least 180 people have been intercepted on small boats in the English Channel this morning in a second day now of migrant activity. So far, the Border Force has spotted 6 vessels. It comes after the Ministry of Defence confirmed that 254 people arrived in 7 small boats on Sunday. In Ukraine, Mariupol officials say that Russia resumed selling the besieged steel plant in the city as soon as buses carrying civilians fleeing the plant had left. President Zelensky says the first group of evacuees will arrive in a Ukrainian-held city today. Footage shows them emerging from the plant's rubble and being led to waiting coaches. One woman said she and her baby had been waiting for 2 months to be rescued. A record 2.7 million people have been referred for cancer checks over the last year. NHS data shows the number of patients receiving cancer treatment has risen by 2,000 since the start of the pandemic. Conservative MP Crispin Blunt has announced he'll stand down at the next election. Last month, the former Justice Minister apologised after he tweeted in support of an MP who was found guilty of sexually assaulting a 15-year-old boy. Blunt originally claimed the MP, Imran Ahmed Khan, was the victim of a dreadful miscarriage of justice before issuing an apology. The Minister for Higher and Further Education, Michelle Donnellan, is rejecting calls to introduce an all-women shortlist to replace the former MP Neil Parish. Parish sparked a by-election in his Tiverton and Honiton constituency after he resigned, having admitted watching pornography in the Commons. Some Conservatives had suggested that a female candidate should replace him. Delays in passport processing could cost over £1 billion in cancelled trips this summer. Research from the Centre for Economics and Business estimate there's currently a 50% probability of people having a successful and timely passport renewal. The Passport Office advises to apply 10 weeks in advance due to the delays. You're up to date. Now we'll head back shortly to Patrick and Mercy.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's 2 questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christys.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Morning all, it's 11:37. This is To The Point with me, Patrick Christys and Mercy Moroki on GB News, live as ever on your TV, online and radio. Yes, what?
That was very abrupt. I was expecting a this morning, on this delightful morning at the end of that. Well, former tennis star Boris Becker will be waking up this morning in Her Majesty's Prison, Wandsworth, less than 2 miles away from where he won his first of 3 Wimbledon titles in 1987, aged just 17.
Yes, indeed. Well, before his sentencing for fraud on Friday, Boris had enjoyed a life of celebrity stardom as the #1 tennis player in the world. So as he wakes up in what ex-prisoner Chris Atkins called one of the most notorious jails in the country, what is life behind bars actually like? Well, here to explain what it must be like for a celebrity to go from riches to rags, as it were, is the wonderful psychologist, friend of the show, Dr. Pam Spur. Dr. Pam, thank you very much. So, it must be tricky, mustn't it, to go from, you know, a nice, sprawling Kensington house or something like that to, you know, sharing a prison cell with a murderer or something?
Oh, good morning. Yes, I've never met Boris Becker, but one thing I do know from sports psychology research is that to have gotten to where he has in tennis, you have to have the personality trait of determination and drive, and also high need for achievement, as we psychologists talk about. You know, most of us will be happy with a job promotion in, say, 10 years, every 10 years, you know. But someone who gets to the top of that highly competitive sport has a very high need for achievement. Now, what happens? He also has a risk-taking streak, as we know from the huge risks he took by trying to hide assets, as well as his risks he's taken in relationships, his lavish spending. Now, those traits are in conflict. So will imprison his determination to succeed and achieve highly, i.e. toe the line and do well, or his risk-taking trait play out in a more powerful way. So that's left to be seen. One thing that's shown about also celebrities in prison, from a psychological perspective, is they're often awarded all sorts of kudos and extra, treats, and they get fan clubs within their fellow inmates, and so they often have an easy ride. But Wandsworth Prison is not an easy ride for anyone. So the fact that he's lived this lavish lifestyle, having just come from his £22,000 a month rental home in Wimbledon into Wandsworth, means there will undoubtedly be a crash. That would be, my guess would there be a massive crash. He's 54. He may even have a midlife crisis with, coming from this age and having his lifestyle whipped from under his feet and landing himself in a place like Wandsworth. There's a lot at play here with him, and we just have to wait and see how his personality traits and his age play out.
No, indeed. I mean, the conditions are relatively shocking, actually. It's kind of a crumbling Victorian jail, from what I can gather. And, it just seems to be 2 to a cell, pretty much. The beds are bunk beds. There's one very close to the other one as well. Pretty grim facilities, it must be said. And it does house some of the most notorious criminals in the country. But on a different psychological note, Dr. Pam, how will Boris Becker go from being known as tennis legend Boris Becker, man about town Boris Becker, to say the least, to criminal Boris Becker?
Well, again, he may well capitalize on this, as some people, Paris Hilton, Martha Stewart, various celebrities have capitalized on their times behind bars. He may be looking for a book deal, film deal, claw his way out of his financial, hole that he's in. So if he's wise, he will keep his head down, play the game, stay out of trouble, use his charm. Let's not forget that celebrities learn how to turn on the charm, particularly in times when they're under stress, because they have to go to do their PAs, their public appearances. They have to, they're interviewed. Tons of interviews say after, say, a big match. They have to learn the skill of charm. So he may be able to use that knowledge that he's gained over his years to charm his way out of difficult situations and charm the right people in Wandsworth Prison who will give him some backup.
Good stuff, Dr. Pam. Thank you very much, as ever. Tremendous to have you on the show. Dr. Pam Spur there. I think kind of psychoanalysing Boris Becker, really, and how he will do in prison or otherwise. Yes, how well do you think you'd get on in prison?
Have you seen me?
Yeah?
I wouldn't get on very well at all.
Do you not think?
No, I'm too... I wouldn't get on well in a fight, for one. I've never had a fight in my life, so I'd be useless at that. They'd probably think I'm a massive nerd as well. Which probably doesn't bode well when you're in a prison full of thugs. No, that's the thing. I mean, my take on it was maybe to kind of like Andy Dufresne it, which was just try and do their accounts, but I'm terrible at maths, so I couldn't even I'd have nothing to offer.
I'd have very little to offer.
But blood, toil, sweat and tears. In
prison, yes, absolutely, but it's just a good job I'm not better looking. Anyway, on Thursday, people will go to the polls in local council elections. With the cost of living crisis, and Boris Johnson finding himself continuously embroiled in the Partygate controversy. Well, will it hit the Tories at the ballot box? I mean, you could flip it on its head as well and talk about Beergate, couldn't you? But anyway, there we go. Our London reporter, Alice Porter, looks at 3 key areas in the capital for this election.
Traditionally, London has been red in a sea of blue in the south-east of England, with 21 of London's 33 boroughs currently under Labour's control. But the Lib Dems are defending their stronghold in southwest London, where they have 3 MPs. They're hoping to increase their 3 Lib Dem-run councils on Thursday. In 2018, Barnet and Wandsworth voted Conservative. Croydon continued to vote Labour. But could that all change in this election?
On May the 5th, people in Croydon will vote in a new mayor for the first time, following a referendum last year. And a key issue dominating the local council elections is Labour's handling of the borough's finances after the council had to declare bankruptcy in 2020.
They've been given the money, where's the money gone? It's not them suffering, it's everyone else suffering, and the area's turning into, quite frankly, a dump. And they need to be held accountable.
They need to be brought to question. They need to tell everyone openly how they spent that money, who took the money, where did it go, and we need to get it back.
I think we really need to press on, try and shake off that anger and see what we can do to make things better.
On the other side of London, Keir Starmer has been out campaigning in Barnet, which has the highest Jewish population in the UK. Labour lost the seat in 2018 under Jeremy Corbyn amidst criticism of the party's handling of anti-Semitism. Daniel Koski is director of the London Jewish Forum.
I think we'll see people who previously were historic Labour voters but felt like they couldn't vote for the Labour Party at the last election, feeling like they probably can vote for the Labour Party this time around. But I think what's going to be particularly interesting is, are the Labour Party going to be able to win back those Jewish swing voters who at the last election were absolutely not going to vote for the Labour Party, but this time around, can they convince them to vote for the Labour Party if they are, say, unhappy with the government?
The Conservatives have held Wandsworth for over 40 years, keeping popular with the lowest average council tax in the country. But political scientist Sir John Curtis says polls suggest they may lose it to Labour.
We can anticipate something like 2-3% swing against the Conservatives across London. Nothing very large, but if that were to happen, the odds are that would probably be sufficient, given there are a number of marginal wards for the Conservatives to be unseated. So they're going to have to do bucking the trend once again if they're going to hang on to this borough.
After a difficult few weeks for Boris Johnson, Thursday will be the first electoral test to see whether it will impact the Conservatives in the ballot box. Alice Porter, GB News.
Good stuff.
It should be an interesting election, right? It'd be the first sort of litmus test of how much Partygate and Beergate, as you mentioned, has had, how much of an impact it has had on the electorate, I suppose.
I think it's, I think it'll be really hard to judge whether or not it's just Partygate or Beergate or this, that and the other, won't it? Because there's been so many things going on. But I tell you what, though, Boris Johnson needs to stick some people who are coming over the channel on a plane to Rwanda sharpish, because if he doesn't do that, and maybe if people go to the polls and they see that this flagship Rwanda scheme isn't deterring people coming over and they're not getting moved on anytime soon, it's going to become very difficult, I think, for him. But I'm going to go to some of our views now, GBviews at gbnews.uk. Lots of you getting in touch about Boris Becker, saying it won't harm his reputation these days. The standards of the business world are lower than they used to be. So there we go. So yes, it's almost as even the Grey Twins henchmen are all given TV personality. That's from Bernard. So I think in the light of that, what Boris Becker's done is nothing really, isn't it? But
Rob from Hove says, Patrick and Mercy, Westminster does need reform. They need to deal with real issues such as Ukraine, cost of living, immigration, etc., etc. But all we get is the PM having cake, Rainer flashing her legs, porn, who paid for wallpaper, etc., etc. Minor issue after minor issue. Putin must be laughing at the full batch of MPs. And that's a serious point, because we are facing an actual national crisis and an international crisis as well. And yet there's a constant conveyor belt, isn't there, over the last few months and weeks of pathetic stories, really, that in the grand scheme don't really make that any difference to people's ordinary lives.
No, and it cracked me up, absolutely cracked me up last week when John Speller came on and he was talking about... I said, well, what about he's a Labour MP? So what about Beergate? You know, well, that's just a smokescreen. No, with all we've got going on in the world at the moment, how can you be going on about Beergate? I said, well, you've been bringing up Partygate for the last 3.5 flipping months. Anyway, there we go. Right, OK, moving on. Keeping up with our elections theme for a moment, anyway. Now, our Culture and Social Affairs editor, Inaya Falarian-Aman, has this report on what role the identity culture wars might play in those elections.
Elections are taking place across the UK on the 5th of May. Voters in England, Wales and Scotland will pick who they want to run services that affect everyday life in their local area. The results are likely to reflect how people feel about Boris Johnson, the Partygate scandal, how COVID has been handled and the rising cost of living. But what about the culture wars? From the Black Lives Matter protests of 2020 to heated debates about transgender rights, the last few years has seen conflicts over race, gender and identity become potent focal points of political contestation.
My question, is it transphobic to say only women have a cervix?
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that.
But to what extent does the culture wars impact the way the public votes? Are the culture wars driven by an outrage-hungry political and media class? Does it reflect real divisions over fundamental questions of freedom of speech, equality and the balancing of rights? I had a chat with Rennie Anjay, a consultant at Global Future, who this week published the Centre Holds report, which takes a deeper look at voters' attitudes to the culture wars.
There is a huge space of consensus in the British public. Where we find divisions is primarily down to Leave and Remain. So what we actually find is that even 6 years after the referendum, Leave and Remain still predicts your views on a lot of these cultural issues. So there does seem to be some division. However, we shouldn't actually overstate that. 8% of Leave voters want no immigration at all. So the idea that somehow all of these Leave voters don't value immigration at all whatsoever, I mean, that also isn't borne out by the evidence. What we actually find is that there is a huge degree of complexity and nuance on these issues. And that is important because actually many of the stereotypes that we have in the culture wars, whether it's gammons, who are sort of right-wing gammons on one side, who, you know, are in denial about racism and think that the British Empire was all fantastic, or whether it's sort of this sort of hyper-liberal, woke, snowflake Remainer, both of those aren't true. And actually, I think one of the most important things that we find in our research is that these stereotypes, these narratives that are used on left and right actually only serve to divide. The gender issue is quite interesting. Consistently, a third of people in our polling say they don't know or they're unsure.
On questions of gender and sex, the point about a significant proportion of the public just not knowing what they think about this issue is a pertinent one. I sat down with a woman who is trying to change this and raise this issue to the top of the political agenda.
I'm Maya Forstatter, I'm the Executive Director of Sex Matters, and together with two women's organisations, we started a campaign for this local election called Respect My Sex, If You Want My Ex. and it's a single issue campaign around women's sex-based rights and the definition of woman.
And why did you want to start that campaign? Why did you women feel that this was an issue that you really wanted to campaign on?
Well, so many politicians were tying themselves in knots. They couldn't answer the question, what is woman, or does a woman have a penis? And, you know, if you can't answer that question, then you can't protect women's rights when it comes to sports, when it comes to single-sex services, when it comes to collecting data, and when it comes to understanding women's needs.
And what about race and racism? Debates over statues and history, whether and how to teach about racism in schools, and to what extent racism is still a significant problem in today's Britain, has never been too far away from the headlines. Few cases better exemplify this than in Brighton, where the council's anti-racism strategy sparked a counter-movement of local activists and parents worried about its potential consequences. I spoke to Adrian Hart, a key figure in this counter-movement.
I would say that Brighton and Hove has become something of a flagship for its progressive council to roll out in a most candid and explicit way critical race theory as its basis for its anti-racism schools strategy. This stuff has a bit of a nerve to call itself anti-racism. It's racializing kids, it's divisive, it's inferring that white kids should feel guilty and that their black friends are the victims of a society that is out to get them. And that is what was constructed for Brighton. There was a big document. It was a 5-year plan. And actually, one of the problems with using consultants is it's so opaque. We can't ask our schools to tell us what they're being taught by consultants and workshops run by consultants, because the consultants will say we have copyright. And I just hope that when we have our local elections next year, there'll be a lot of people who will vote simply because, and it's not just on the anti-racism stuff, this council acts like a sort of magisterium of woke thinking, and the average citizen of Brighton is sick of it.
In a democracy, it is undoubtedly laudable when ordinary people come together and organise to raise awareness about issues that concern them in order to encourage change. But what do members of the public, not necessarily involved in these sorts of campaigns, think?
I think it's largely empty words. I think that the actual implementation of this policy, I think, will wither on the vine over the next few years. It will cease to be a story that, you know, makes the headlines, and then we'll be back where we started. But I think nationally we have a huge problem with racism, and I think that we need to address it in a serious way. And I don't think that
that is the kind of bit that I contend with, I suppose, because when you say we go back to where we started, I think where we started was good, given that we were in the second decade of the 21st century, and I've worked in schools all around the south of England, and especially in London and Essex.
It seems to me that in order to navigate these thorny and often complex subjects, an important starting point is having a space where people can disagree and put their perspectives forward in a good faith way without fear, as was exemplified between these two residents in Brighton. Whether we like it or not, the culture wars are here, and politicians would be best to engage with and provide solutions to people's concerns rather than avoiding these difficult questions.
There we go, a knife Lauren Iman there whizzing you through what is a very complex issue, actually.
Yeah.
The role of culture wars and certain different elements of culture, anyway, are playing in the public psyche at the moment. We talk about it all the time here, don't we? She identified some key elements there as well, but I'm just going to go now to a response from the council there. So they were obviously approached for comment, and they've said the council was approached for a comment, and they did not respond.
Yes, that's the response.
That's the response. The response, is that they did not respond. Apologies.
Yeah.
There we go, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I might start doing things like that. Would you like to comment on this? My response is that I will not be responding to this. You know?
Very politicians answer.
Yeah. Yeah, the council... Fantastic. Sorry, that's really cracked me up there. Anyway, right, look, thank you so much to all of you who've been getting in touch today. Loads of comments in the inbox. We'll make sure we go to more of them tomorrow. gbviews@gbnews.uk. And get in touch with us as well for Wednesday. Wednesday is very much the viewers' show. It's all about you. We do a show curated by you. What topics do you want discussed? To the point at gbnews.uk is that email address. Get in touch.
Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking rather cloudy to start with some fog. It'll turn brighter but also showery. Let's get the details. Starting off in the southwest, and this morning's cloud is set to linger until lunchtime for many, with a few spots of drizzly rain, feeling markedly warmer than yesterday though. It's also looking mostly cloudy across much of the southeast and around London. It'll be mostly dry and any early fog should have cleared. It's a different story for Wales. Here the cloud is going to break up, allowing for some sunny breaks, but also a scattering of showers. It's looking similar across many parts of the West Midlands. It'll be brightest for more northern parts with more showers here. Meanwhile, further south the cloud is set to linger. Coastal parts of northeast England may have some lingering fog as we head through lunchtime and into this afternoon. Inland, things will be brighter, but a greater chance of some showers developing too. Whilst northern areas of Scotland are looking mostly fine with some lengthy bright periods, it will be more showery for central and southern parts, though still some sunny spells. There'll also be a mixture of sunny spells and scattered showers across Northern Ireland. Here temperatures are set to reach highs of around 15 Celsius. There'll be further showers as we head through the afternoon, with the cloud in the south breaking up. And that's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christys.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for